Hi, my name is Daniel Abrahamberg and welcome to my course Modern Architecture. This is part 2 of chapter 3, Basic Linux 101. And today we are reviewing some commands and utilities. I believe that if you learn these, you can perform most of the tasks that you need to do to put your own applications on a Linux server. As a matter of fact, we are going to do that in part 3 and 4 of this chapter. Okay, let's begin. In the previous part, we used git bash to connect to our instance. As Windows users, we have other options too. One popular option is to use PuTTY. And if you are a Linux user or Mac user, your public key should have the right permissions, so you can use it in your terminal. I made a cheat sheet and put all the commands and utilities that we are going to use in that. You can print it and have it somewhere near your desk, or you can bookmark the address on my website and refer to it whenever you need. First of all, there are 4 signs I want you to familiarize yourself with. The Linux shell interprets the single slash as root, the tilde sign as home, a single dot as the current directory, and a double dot as the parent directory. As you can see it on your cheat sheet, you can combine it with the cd command to change your current path. While we are at it, let's take 2 more commands. The command ls used to list all the files on the folder. As you see on the cheat sheet, some of the commands are followed by hyphen and some letters. These are options or flags. For example, in the case of ls, hyphen L means long, H means human, and A means all. So it shows all the files, including the hidden ones. And human means human readable. It lists the size of the files and directories in human readable manner. For example, 1K for 1 kilobyte and 1M for 1 megabyte, and so on. And option L gives you a long listing. I'm going to show you. But before that, just notice pwd command too. It might remind you of a password, but it has nothing to do with passwords. It just shows you the current path. Let's try these commands and discuss it a little bit further. Okay, let's review one more time how to connect to our instance. You use SSH followed by option I and your public key followed by username @ the IP of the server. In case you don't have a public key, instead you have a password, you just skip -I and the public key. And now we are connected. You see the tilde sign here, and it means that we are on the home directory. So if I use pwd command, you see I get /home/Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is my username. Let's use cd command to change our current path to the root. As you see it here, our current path is changed. Let's use the ls command from our cheat sheet. These are all the files and directories in our root folder. Some of the folders you might need to know about are, for example, temp, that is a temporary place for your files. So it's a place that all the users has full access to, and all the files you put there, they're removed after each restart of the server. Then it is home that we just came from, and by default each user has a directory there. var stands for variable, and it contains things that are prone to change. For example, database files, log files, website files. etc directory is used for configuration files. And it is good to know that dev directory stands for device, not development. And as a Linux programmer, you can communicate with your devices using this directory. But if you want to run a web server, you shouldn't really change anything in that directory. We have some more information here. The first column is file permissions. I'm going to tell you all about that in a few minutes. The second one is the number of links or directories. Then we have owner and owner group, file size, and time of the last modification. The last column is the name of the files and directories. Let's use tilde to go to the home, pwd, and as expected, we get /home/Ubuntu. Note that Ubuntu is our username, so if my username was Daniel, tilde would refer to /home/Daniel. Use slash to go to root again, and as expected. And one more time, tilde. This time, we want to go to the parent directory, home. What we do? We use cd followed by a double dot, pwd, and you see we are at home. You actually don't need pwd because you see the current address here. I'm keep using it to emphasize a little bit. What happens if we write cd/etc/? This is for you to discover. At this point, I suggest that you pause the video and try what you just learned. From your cheat sheet, let's take mkdir that makes a directory and the echo command that not only outputs a string, but also you can make a new file containing some string with that. Here, if I just type echo followed by a string, so it outputs the string on the screen. On the other hand, if I type the same thing followed by greater than and a file name, this command creates a file containing the text hello world. Let's list the content of the directory and you see the file is made. Note that I'm not using all the options of the ls, but only I'm using L. You can choose which options you want to use. Let's make two directories, folder 1 and folder 2. Note that I didn't type the second command. I just used up arrow key to get to the latest command. This is really handy and you don't need to unnecessarily type long commands. Just use up arrow key to access the previous commands and you can keep pushing it and explore your bash history. Make sure you make use of up and down arrow keys. It saves so much time. Let's list one more time. And you see folder 2 and folder 1 are in place. Let's use cp command from our cheat sheet for copying files. I'm going to copy my file.txt to folder 1. Let's go to the folder 1. Our current path is /home/Ubuntu/folder1 now. I use ls to list the content of the current directory, and as expected the file is copied. cd followed by double dot takes us back to the parent directory, which is /home/Ubuntu, and I could have used tilde, right? Let's list the content of the current directory now. And you see my file.txt is still there too. So we have a copy of it inside folder 1 and the original is still here. Let's try mv from our cheat sheet to move the file this time. mv myfile.txt space folder2 moves myfile.txt to the folder2. I run ls one more time here and you see that myfile.txt is gone. We go to folder2, list the content of the directory, and myfile.txt is there. You can use mv to rename the files too. You just move the file with the different name at the same address. Okay, let's clear. I run ls without any option this time. Look what we get. No details. So we are in folder 2 and it contains only myfile.txt. This time we are going to try cat and less commands from our cheat sheet. Cat followed by myfile.txt and it outputs the content of the file. Same as the less, although our file is not long enough to be reasonable to use less. Pressing Q button and we are out. Let's go back to the home directory and this time we use Nano file editor to create a new file. Nano mylongfile.txt. I just marked the start of the file and I use some randomly generated text and I paste it here. Down here you see your options. Pressing Ctrl and X for the exit, Y for yes, and our file is created. Let's double check by doing ls. Let's do less one more time and now we get paging. Less is especially perfect for reading very long files because it reads just a little bit that it wants to show at the time. Makes this utility to work very fast. I press Q to quit. And let's go back to our cheat sheet and take a look at our compressing utilities. We are going to use tar for compressing and decompressing. Tar puts multiple files into a single file. gzip, on the other hand, compress only one file. So when you combine these two, you get one single compressed file. The same effect that you get from zip or rar in Windows. That's why in the Linux world you see a lot of files named archive.tar.gz. Another algorithm to compress a file is bzip2. You can combine it with tar as well. You just add option Z for gzip or J for bzip. You use X option with tar to extract files from the archive. Let's see it in action. I am going to demonstrate this on my Git bash instead of a Linux. So you know it is possible to do it on a Git bash too. So I have a folder here with a size of roughly 687 million. I use tar create verbose file and I call it archive tar. Let's put it in archive. And if I list, we get almost the same size. Let's clear here. And this time I press up arrow and change it so it's a gzip format. It takes a few seconds for the algorithm to compress. And if I list it, you see there is a difference. It is smaller. I do the same for bzip2 as well. And we wait. Let's list it with a human readable option this time. And you see bzip2 also compress, but not as much as gzip. Let's extract one of these files. I make a folder and use X option to mark that I'm going to extract. And you should not forget -C. And I list it, and we have a new directory called archive. Now that you learn how to archive files, you probably want to be able to move files to your server too. You can use Scp Utility for that. And its syntax reminds me of SSH, so I just put it under the SSH on your cheat sheet. You can use this utility both to move a file from your local machine to server or from the server to your own local machine. And in case you don't have a public key, you just skip -I public key pem. scp-i. I made a file called to-go.txt and put it next to my public key. I put the public key here, followed by the name of the file I'm going to transfer, followed by my username @IP address, and colon the address on the server that I want to copy the file to. And of course, it should start with the slash. I could have used tilde, by the way. And make sure your user has the permission to copy files on the destination. That's why your home directory is a good option. Let's go to our server and see if we find the file there. Here's the to-go file. Let's copy my long file from the server to my local machine. Up arrow and modify. And I forgot the file name. Let's copy it from server. Here you go. Everything is here. Okay, let's create a directory on the root. What? I can't? Now it's time for permissions. In Linux, there is a user called root. And root is like a god. The root user has access to everything. The good news is that you can play God too. Just write sudo before your commands, and that way you run your commands as the root. Much better. So here's the folder we made. Let's go inside and make a simple text file. Come on, not again. Well, we know what to do, right? What happened to the play God thingy? So this is combination of two commands. The sudo one goes for echo, not for making the file. The even better news is that not only you can play God, you can become a god. You just need to know the magic word. And that is sudo su. Sounds like dragon language in the Skyrim, doesn't it? And you see your username became root. Now you can do whatever you want. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility. Let's try one more time. And yes, our file is made now. And I'm showing you these details for the files all the time. And you probably have a big question mark right now about what these letters means. Well, I told you this is permissions, but I'm sure you're really eager to know what do they mean. Are they Dragon language letters? Let's go to our cheat sheet and zoom in. Each file and directory has permissions to its owner, group, and others. And these permissions are read, write, execute. So let's interpret the permissions for the file we just made. For now, ignore the first character. After that, the first three characters are related to the owner, and the owner for this file is root. And the owner has read and write but not execute write. The second group of letters is related to the group of the file. And there is a group that is called root, and the user root is a member of that group. Remember, never ever assign any other user to this group. You can do that, but that's a big risk. So the group has a permission to read but not write or execute. The last three is for others. And as you can see, others also can only read but not write or execute. By the way, the user root doesn't care about permissions. It just has all the rights. Okay, I don't want that much of power. Let's exit. And we become Ubuntu user again. The Ubuntu user counts as others for this file because it's not in the group and it's not the owner. So we can just read the file. And copying the file is count as reading. I copy it to the home. As a user with the username Ubuntu, I am a member of a group that is called Ubuntu. And all the files in this folder are owned by me and my group Ubuntu. And as you see, my username has read and write permission to all the files and directories. By the way, the first character is usually either a hyphen or a D. And a hyphen is for file and D is for directory. Let's go back to our test folder. And let's use Nano text editor to edit the file. You see, I can read the file, but I can't change and save the file. This is some scenario that you face often, and you probably want to use sudo before your command. See, with sudo, I can change the file. Let's add a new user called user1. See, the same thing. I can't make a new user. To do that, I need to use sudo. As soon as I make a new user, a new group with the same name is also made, and the user is assigned to that one, as well as a directory that is made for this user under the home directory. And this is the home of this user. I hope that you understood by now the reason that there is a group called Ubuntu and there is a directory under home with the name of Ubuntu is that my username is Ubuntu. It has nothing to do with the fact that we are running Ubuntu Linux. Okay, let's give this guy a new password. Typical me with passwords. Let's try again. And I call him Jack. You don't really need to fill these forms. Let's also add a group. I call it group 1. You can add as many as users you want to a group. Let's head back to our cheat sheet and see how we can change the permission of a file or directory. To achieve that, we use chmod. The permission consists of 3 numbers: owner, group, and others. The way you calculate each of these numbers is that 0 for no permission, 1 for execute, 2 for write, and 4 for read. And if you want a combination of these, you just add up. For example, if you want write and execute, it's gonna be 1 plus 2, 3. If you want read and execute, it's gonna be 1 plus 4, 5, and so on. And the flag -r marks it as recursive, meaning it applies your command to all the files, directories, and subdirectories. We want to apply chmod 750 to oops 750 to my file. Right now we are applying it just to a file, so it doesn't mean anything to use the recursive flag. See, the permission of the file is changed now. Right now, others can't even read the file. Let's use chown to change the owner and the group. Owner, Ubuntu user, and group 1. And it is changed. Let's do a nano from Ubuntu user, see what happens. This time I didn't use sudo, but still I can edit and save the file because I am the owner of the file. One thing I see confuses people is the concept of owner. Rationally, when you own something, then you should have all the permissions to it. Like for example, DB owner. Here is another story. The owner's permissions is set separately. A user can be owner to a file without having a permission to read the file. So make sure that you understand that. Let's cat it and see if it's changed. Yes, it is changed. Now we change owner and the group of the parent file. And notice that I didn't use recursive flag. The file here is still owned by Ubuntu user, but the parent folder is now owned by user 1. If I used recursive flag, it would change the ownership of the file inside the directory too. Let's head back to the cheat sheet and review what we learned. We learned how to interpret permissions for files and directories. We also learned how to set these permissions for owner, group, and others for each file or directory. We also learned how to assign and change the owner and groups for each file and directory. And remember, changing the owner or a group doesn't change the permissions. So you set the permissions separately and they are there until you change it. We also know what is the flag R for recursive application of our command to directories. Remember, you can do both chmod or chown recursively when it's applied to a directory. But for a file, it doesn't make sense to apply recursively. So in our cheat sheet, we have one example for applying to the directory recursively, and the other one is applied to a file. I just want to make sure that you understand that while you are using your cheat sheet. Then we learned how to make a new user. We also seen that as soon as we make a new user, a new group with the same name and a directory under the home directory with the same name is made and assigned to this user. You can make a new group and you can assign the users you want to that group. So if I want, for example, that a few users has the permission to read and write from a folder, I'm gonna make a new group, assign the users to that group, set the permissions for read and write to the group, and assign the group to the folder. One last thing about permissions: do not give your programs or users more permissions that they need. If they just need to read, don't give them write. This way you are protecting your server from malwares to take over the server and do things that you don't want them to do. Guess what? You did it again. You practice a little bit on your server and you are going to be really good at it. And don't be afraid to write commands. Everybody feels that it's not for me. This is for command line people. Well, there is no such a thing. Nobody is gifted at birth to be a command line person. And nobody really likes it at the beginning. It's an acquired taste, like a coffee or whiskey. If you start doing it, suddenly you realize, oh, I like it. Okay, at the next chapter, we are going to learn how to install new software on your Linux. And we are going to install SQL Server, Nginx, and set up a web server with a domain name. Great that you are here, and if you want the other people find these videos, just like it and subscribe. Give yourself a pat on the back, because in about half an hour, you learned something that a lot of people are afraid of their whole life. You entered the Linux territory. Welcome. Thank you very much and see you at the third part of this chapter.